I remember that day so clearly. It was supposed to be a happy day. Valerie had been gone for 2 weeks on this girls' trip with her sister, Jessica. It was supposed to be a vacation for them, relaxing in some tropical paradise. I didn't think much of it. I mean, sure, it was a little weird that Valerie and Jessica went away without the kids or me, but we both worked hard, and I figured she deserved some time to unwind. I wasn't worried. I trusted her. I stood there in the airport with Riley and Emma, both of them bouncing with excitement, holding that stupid banner I made that read, "Welcome home, Mom." I'd spent all morning getting it perfect. Big, colorful letters, even a couple of sparkly stars. I had my camera ready, too, wanting to capture the moment. The kids kept asking how much longer it would be until Mom was back, practically vibrating with anticipation. I hadn't seen her in 2 weeks, and I missed her, even though part of me felt a little off, too. I couldn't pinpoint why, but something felt strange. It's not like she'd given me any reason to doubt her, but I couldn't help but feel like there was something I wasn't seeing. Maybe I was just paranoid. I had been working hard, spending time with the kids, trying to keep things running smoothly, and she was off in the sun somewhere with Jessica. So maybe it was just me being tired being a dad, you know? But then, I saw them. There they were, coming through the gates. Valerie and Jessica, both tanned and glowing. Valerie was stunning as usual. Always had been, always will be. But that day, she looked different. She was glowing, almost radiating, like the sun had done more than just tan her. It was like she was beaming, like some kind of goddess. I don't know how to explain it, but I noticed it right away. There was something in her smile, something a little too bright, a little too easy. The kids were already running toward her, arms outstretched. Riley screamed, "Mom," and ran full speed, Emma not far behind. Valerie knelt down to hug them, and I could see the love in her eyes as she wrapped them both up. It was a beautiful moment, but I couldn't shake that feeling in my gut, that weird twist in my chest that made everything feel just a little bit off. Still, I pushed it aside. I was being paranoid, right? I walked toward her, holding out my arms, trying to smile like everything was fine. Valerie got up and gave me a hug, her cheek brushing against mine as she pulled me in close. "I missed you," she whispered, but there was a sharpness in her voice that didn't match the sweetness of her words. I hugged her back, trying to ignore the fact that she was holding me just a little too tightly, a little too urgently. She smelled like coconut oil, sun, and something else I couldn't place. It wasn't unpleasant, but it wasn't her usual scent either. My mind started racing, but I tried to push it all down. Maybe it was just the excitement of being home, of being back with the family. "Let's get you guys home," I said, trying to act normal. Valerie smiled, a little too wide. "I can't wait to sleep in my own bed." She was teasing me, but there was a strange glint in her eyes. It didn't feel like the playful teasing I was used to. This was different. We got back to the house, the kids laughing and talking about everything they'd missed. I noticed Valerie seemed distracted. She'd get quiet, then talk fast, then go quiet again. Her energy was all over the place, and I couldn't figure out why. That night, when the kids were in bed and the house was finally quiet, we had a moment. It was just the two of us, sitting on the couch like we used to, the lights dim, soft music playing in the background. Valerie was all flirty again, teasing me with that same playful smile I'd loved so much before. It felt like old times for a second, and I wanted to believe everything was fine, that she was just tired from the trip. She leaned in close, her voice low and a little seductive. "I missed you so much," she said, brushing her lips against my ear. Her hand slid down my arm, her fingers trailing lightly over my skin. For a second, I thought we might go back to the way things were. I was excited too. Who wouldn't be? But then it hit me. I hadn't felt this distant before, this uneasy around her. I could feel the warmth of her body next to mine, but it didn't comfort me the way it used to. The way she was touching me, it felt off. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like she was trying to convince me of something, trying too hard to make me believe that everything was fine. And then, just like that, the moment passed. Valerie pulled back, smiling at me like nothing had happened. I sat there, frozen for a second, trying to shake off the feeling that had lodged itself in my chest. She went to the bathroom, and I just sat there. My mind raced. Was I just being paranoid? Or was something wrong? I tried to shake it off. I was just happy she was home. But deep down, something felt off. I didn't know what it was yet, but I would soon enough. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they weren't going to let me rest. The next few days after Valerie returned, things were weird. I kept telling myself I was just overthinking it, that everything was fine. But the more time passed, the more I noticed things about her that made me feel uneasy. Small things really, but the kind of things that, once you notice them, you can't ignore. For one, her phone. Valerie had always been kind of attached to her phone, like most people, but lately, she was glued to it in a way I hadn't seen before. She'd get a message, and instead of just checking it and putting it down like usual, she'd kind of glance at it, then quickly lock it or slip it into her pocket. It wasn't like she was hiding anything. I mean, not outright, but there was this nervousness about her when she did it. Like she didn't want me to see something, even though I hadn't asked to. Then, there was the way she'd act when I'd try to bring up the trip. I wasn't looking for details, but I was curious about what she and Jessica had done, where they went, and how everything went down. But whenever I asked, Valerie would get a little defensive. It was subtle at first, like she'd brush me off with a quick, "It was amazing, Darren. You wouldn't believe how beautiful it was." Or, "I'm so tired. I'll tell you everything tomorrow." She was tired a lot. Too tired. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized she was acting different. More distant. More distracted. She'd even stopped doing the little things she used to do, like sitting next to me on the couch or giving me a kiss goodbye when she left the house. It wasn't huge stuff, but it added up. Then one night, I walked through the kitchen after the kids had gone to bed, and I saw Valerie there, cooking dinner. She was wearing one of those tight tank tops she knows I like, and her body was swaying as she moved around the kitchen. It was like she was putting on a show. Now, I'm not saying she didn't always look good, she always did, but that night, it felt different. Almost like she was trying to get my attention, but not in the usual, sweet way. No, this was different. I stood there for a moment, just watching her. And that's when I felt it. The most disturbing feeling. Even though she was right in front of me, I felt so far away. Like we weren't on the same page anymore. I tried to shake it off. I was just tired, right? Maybe it was the stress of work, or the kids, or whatever. But the more I thought about it, the worse it got. Every little thing that used to feel normal, every little moment that used to make me feel close to Valerie, started to feel hollow. And then there was the look she gave me sometimes. These strange, fleeting glances that I couldn't quite put my finger on. It was like she was looking at me, but not really seeing me. Like her mind was somewhere else. I'd catch her staring off into space, and when I asked her what she was thinking about, she'd always give me some excuse like, "Just daydreaming," or "It's nothing." But I could tell. It wasn't nothing. It wasn't just random thoughts. It was like she was hiding something, and I was too close to it to even see. That was when the idea first crept into my mind, slowly at first, then all at once. Had she been unfaithful? I hated myself for thinking it. I hated myself for even allowing that thought to get past my brain, but I couldn't help it. Something wasn't right. I kept telling myself, "No, Darren, you're just being paranoid. It's just your nerves playing tricks on you. You're imagining things." But the doubt was growing, and it was eating at me from the inside out. I tried to push it down, tried to ignore it. I told myself it was all in my head. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was just seeing things, or if there was something going on that I couldn't understand. The next morning, it was the same. The same distance. The same avoidance. Every time I tried to talk to her, it was like I was talking to a stranger. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed to know. I had to know if I was being crazy or if there was something to my suspicions. So, while she was in the shower that afternoon, I did something I never thought I would. I grabbed her phone. Now, don't get me wrong. I wasn't some guy who snooped through her things. I trusted her, up until that moment. But something told me I had to look. I told myself I was just checking in on her calendar or something harmless. But my hands were shaking as I unlocked it, my heart racing. I scrolled through her messages, then her emails. Most of it was nothing, work stuff, group chats with Jessica, random check-ins with friends. But then, I found something. A message from someone named Daniel. It was from her encrypted email account, and it made my blood run cold. The message was short, but it was enough. The tone was intimate, personal. Something between them that wasn't just friendly. My stomach dropped. I didn't even need to read the whole thing to know. I felt sick. My worst fear had just been confirmed, and it hit me harder than I could have ever imagined. Valerie, my wife, had been seeing someone else. I didn't even know how long I sat there, just staring at the screen, letting the world around me slip away. This wasn't just a little flirtation. This was something more. Something deep. Something real. I didn't know who Daniel was, but I didn't need to. All I knew was that this man, this stranger, had taken something from me. And Valerie? She had betrayed me in a way I couldn't even put into words. And just like that, my whole world shattered. I was furious. I was confused. But most of all, I was heartbroken. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at that message, just numb. My head was spinning, but in the back of my mind, I kept hearing that voice, the one that had been whispering doubts in my ear for days, saying, "I told you so. I told you something wasn't right." It was like everything in my life had been building up to this exact moment. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, shatter it into a million pieces, but I didn't. I just held it there in my hands, letting the truth sink in, piece by piece. Valerie had been seeing someone else. And it wasn't some one-off thing. This was something planned. Something that had been going on for who knows how long. Her affair. That's what this was. I could feel my chest tightening, my blood boiling. I had never, in a million years, imagined this would happen. Valerie wasn't just my wife. She was my best friend. She was supposed to be the one person I could trust, the one person who would always have my back. But there I was, betrayed in a way I could never have seen coming. I had never imagined that she could do something like this to me, to our family. My thoughts were racing, but one thing was crystal clear. I wasn't just going to sit back and take this. I couldn't. I'd spent too many years being loyal, loving, and honest with her. How could she do this to me? I knew I had to confront her, but I didn't know how. I was furious, heartbroken, and scared. What if I was wrong? What if I had misunderstood everything? But deep down, I knew I wasn't wrong. The message was clear. And even if it wasn't, the gut feeling I had was strong enough to tell me the truth. I couldn't wait. I had to do something. I waited for her to come out of the shower. I couldn't even look at her the same way anymore. Everything she did, every little movement felt fake. Her laugh, her smile, even the way she stood, it all felt like a lie now. And I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop the anger rising in me. When she finally stepped out, wrapped in that fluffy towel of hers, she smiled at me. But there was something in her eyes. She knew something was up. Maybe she thought I was just tired, or maybe she could sense the shift in me, but she didn't say anything. I stood up from the couch, feeling like a stranger in my own house. My voice was calm, too calm, when I spoke. "Who's Daniel?" Her face shifted. Just for a second. I saw the flicker of panic, the slightest hesitation. But then, she recovered, and that damn smile of hers came back. "What?" she asked, feigning innocence. "What do you mean?" I didn't need to hear her answer. I knew. But I wasn't going to make this easy for her. "Don't play dumb, Valerie. Who the hell is Daniel?" She froze for a moment, her eyes flickering toward the phone I still held in my hand. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out what to say. The silence between us was suffocating. And then, finally, she spoke. "He's just a friend. Someone I met while we were away. You know, we just talked. It was nothing serious." Her words were smooth, practiced, but I saw the cracks. She wasn't convincing me. And something told me she knew it. "You expect me to believe that?" I asked, my voice rising just a little. "You really think I'm that stupid? You've been seeing him while you were on vacation, haven't you?" She didn't answer right away. She just stood there, biting her lip. She knew she was caught. I could see the guilt in her eyes. But instead of apologizing, instead of begging for forgiveness, she did the worst thing she could have done. She lied. Again. I didn't sleep with him, Darren, she said quickly, like that somehow made it better. We were just talking. Nothing more. I don't know why, but that answer hit me harder than the rest of it. The betrayal was bad enough, but now she was pretending like I was too naive to see through her lies. It made my blood boil. Just talking, I repeated, shaking my head. For 2 weeks? You were just talking while I'm here with our kids, wondering where you are, missing you every damn night, and you're just talking? You expect me to buy that? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She didn't even try to explain herself. Instead, she just stood there, her face a mix of guilt and defensiveness. She wanted to be mad at me for confronting her, for questioning her. It was like she couldn't even see the magnitude of what she'd done. My fists clenched at my sides. I was so damn angry. I felt like I was suffocating. Every word she said felt like a slap in the face. Don't lie to me, Valerie, I said through gritted teeth. I know what I saw. And I know what you've been doing. It's over. I can't trust you anymore. For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a crack in her perfect facade. Her face faltered, and she reached out toward me. Darren, please, she said, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. You don't understand. But I didn't want to hear it. I couldn't. I was done. I don't want to hear your excuses, I said, cutting her off. I gave you everything, Valerie. And you threw it all away for what? A couple of messages with some guy you met on vacation. She didn't answer. She just stared at me, her eyes full of tears. But I wasn't going to feel sorry for her. I wasn't going to fall for it. Not this time. I turned and walked out of the room. I needed air, I needed space, I needed to get out of that house before I lost my mind completely. But as I walked out the door, I knew one thing for sure. Everything had changed. And it wasn't just the trust that was broken. It was us. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I spent the next few days in a haze, trying to process what had happened, but it was impossible to think clearly. The anger was too raw, too fresh. Every time I looked at Valerie, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. The woman I had loved, the one I had built my life with, was gone. All I could see now was the betrayal. Her lies, her distance, her coldness. She tried to talk to me, of course. She cried, apologized, promised she was sorry, but none of it felt real anymore. How could I trust anything she said? Every word felt like a lie. And every time she begged for forgiveness, I couldn't help but feel more and more disgusted. But it wasn't just her. I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. Whoever the hell he was, he had to pay for what he did to me. And he wasn't going to get away with it. I'd been the one to stand by Valerie through everything. Through the hard times, the good times, the ups and downs of life. And this was how she repaid me, by sleeping with some guy she met on a trip, some stranger who had no idea what he was really getting himself into. I needed to do something. I needed justice. But this wasn't going to be some emotional outburst or some half-assed confrontation. No, I wasn't going to yell at Valerie, or even him yet. I needed to make sure I got my revenge right. I wasn't going to be the idiot who let it slide, who let the pain fester and do nothing about it. I was going to make sure Daniel knew exactly what he had done. I started planning it in my head, piece by piece. I couldn't go to the police. They wouldn't do anything over an affair. But I didn't need them. I had my own way of handling things. I knew where he worked. I knew where he lived. I had all the details I needed. The first step was simple. I needed to get inside his head. I needed him to know that someone was watching him. That someone knew what he had done, even if he didn't realize it yet. That's when I made the call. I texted him from a burner phone I'd picked up the day before. A simple message. Meet me at the lake. I know what you've been up to with Valerie. I knew he would be curious. I knew he'd want to know who I was and why I knew about the affair. But what he didn't know was that I'd already planned for this. I was going to meet him, but he wasn't going to walk away from this. I set everything up carefully. I knew Valerie's schedule now. I knew when she'd be out with the kids, and I knew when Daniel would be stupid enough to show up. The lake was isolated enough that no one would hear anything, but not too far out that I couldn't keep an eye on things. It felt like I was moving in slow motion, like I was waiting for something to happen. But the longer I sat with the plan in my mind, the more I realized I wasn't just angry anymore. I was cold, calculated. And that was the worst part of it all. It didn't feel like I was getting revenge anymore. It felt like I was preparing for war. The night I set the trap, I was calm. Too calm. I drove out there earlier in the evening, parked my car in a hidden spot by the trees, and waited. The cool air was heavy, the kind of quiet that always settles over you when you're waiting for something to happen. Around 9:30 p.m., I saw the headlights in the distance. It was him. Daniel. He pulled up, his car crunching over the gravel. I watched him step out, looking confused, glancing around the empty parking area. His body language was cautious, like he didn't know if this was some kind of joke or if I was really here to confront him. I waited a few moments before I stepped out of the shadows. "Daniel," I called out, my voice cutting through the stillness. His head snapped toward me, his eyes wide with shock. "Who the hell are you?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I'm the guy whose wife you've been sleeping with," I said flatly, taking a few steps toward him. "You don't know me, but I know exactly who you are." His face turned pale. "What the hell do you want from me?" He took a step back, clearly rattled. "I don't want anything from you, Daniel. I just want you to understand something." I took another step forward, my presence imposing. "You think you can come into my life and take what's mine, without any consequences? You're wrong." He stumbled backwards, trying to put distance between us, but I was already too close. "Look, man," he stammered, holding up his hands in defense. "It was just a fling. We didn't mean any harm. I didn't know you guys were." "Shut up," I snapped, my voice low but deadly. "You're not sorry. You're just scared. You should be." I could see it in his eyes. He was scared. His knees were shaking. He didn't know if I was going to hit him, yell at him, or worse. But that wasn't what I was here for. This wasn't about violence. Not really. It was about him understanding that nothing comes without a price. And his price was just beginning. I had him exactly where I wanted him now. He wasn't going to get away with this. Not after what he had done. "You're going to think long and hard about what happened here tonight," I said, my voice calm again. "And you're going to know that you'll never hear from me again, or Valerie, or anyone close to us. But I'm not done, Daniel. You'll know the consequences. Eventually." He opened his mouth to say something, but I didn't let him. I just turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, staring after me. The truth was, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But the first step had been taken. Daniel knew I wasn't someone to mess with. And now it was time to deal with Valerie. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside me. It wasn't just the anger anymore. It was a sense of power, control. For the first time in days, I felt like I was the one calling the shots, like I had a plan, like I wasn't just reacting to everything she had done to me. But as I drove home that night, the weight of everything still sat heavy on my chest. Daniel was dealt with, at least for now. He would be scared, maybe even nervous for the next few days, but he wouldn't forget what happened. That was the point. But none of it meant anything until I handled Valerie. She was the one who had broken me, not him. She was the one who had torn apart everything I thought was solid, everything I thought we had. I couldn't go back to her like nothing had happened. I couldn't just forgive her and move on like some pathetic fool. That would be letting her get away with it. I walked into the house that night, trying to keep my expression neutral, though I was sure my face gave away more than I wanted. Valerie was in the living room, her eyes flicking up to me as I stepped through the door. She had that soft, innocent look on her face, the one she always put on when she wanted to make everything seem okay. The one that used to make my heart melt. But now it just made me sick. "Hey," she said, her voice soft. "You okay? You've been acting weird since we talked earlier." I didn't respond right away. I just set my keys on the counter, keeping my back turned to her. It felt strange, this silence. The way she was standing there, acting like everything was normal. But nothing was normal. Nothing would ever be normal again. "Darren?" she asked again, her voice tentative now. I turned to face her, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel the need to be gentle. I didn't feel the need to pretend. "I'm fine," I said, though it was anything but. "I've just been thinking about everything. About you." She flinched at that, and I noticed how her eyes darted to the floor, then back to me. She knew this was coming. She could feel it. "I don't know what you want me to say, Darren," she said, stepping toward me now. "I know I've messed up. But I'm sorry. Stop," I cut her off, holding up my hand. "I don't want to hear it. I don't want your apologies. Your promises. You had your chance, Valerie. And you threw it all away." She recoiled slightly, her eyes wide, probably not expecting the coldness in my voice. "What are you saying?" Her voice wavered now, panic creeping in. "What do you mean, I had my chance?" I took a step closer to her, watching her back away a little, her chest rising and falling with every breath. "I'm saying I don't trust you anymore. You betrayed me. You betrayed our family. And you think an apology is gonna fix that?" She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't let her. "Do you know what it feels like to be betrayed like that?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "To have the one person you trust the most rip your heart out, just like that? You were my partner, my wife, and you slept with him, with some guy you met on a trip. You don't get to just apologize and expect me to forget." Valerie's eyes filled with tears, and she took a step forward, as if she wanted to reach out, comfort me. But I wasn't interested in her comfort. "I know I messed up," she said again, this time her voice breaking. "I was stupid. I never meant for this to happen. But I love you, Darren. I do. I just made a mistake." "A mistake," I repeated, the bitterness clear in my tone. "You made a mistake? Is that what this is to you? A mistake?" I shook my head, unable to look at her anymore. "You think this is something that can be fixed with a few words? Do you know how many nights I spent waiting for you to come home, wondering if you were still the person I married? All those times I told myself I was just being paranoid. Turns out I wasn't. And you were just playing me." Her tears were flowing now, and I could see her trying to hold it together, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to feel sorry for her anymore. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me with her fake tears. I was beyond that. "I've already made up my mind," I said, my voice firm, my heart hardening with every word. "I'm done. I can't keep living like this." She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't going to listen. I had already made up my mind, and nothing she said was going to change it. "I'm leaving, Valerie," I told her. The words hung heavy between us, like a death sentence. "I can't stay in this house with you anymore. I'm done. I'm done pretending that everything's okay." She froze, her face going pale as her mind processed what I just said. "No," she whispered. "No, Darren, please. Don't do this. Please. I'll do anything. We can work through this. I'm so sorry. I was stupid, but I love you." But it was too late. I was already walking out of the room. As I grabbed my coat, I could hear her calling my name. But I didn't turn back. I couldn't. This wasn't a decision I was making out of spite. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming myself, my dignity, and my peace of mind. I wasn't going to let her destroy me any longer. Not like this. The house felt emptier than ever. And as I drove away, the pain of the last few days still gnawing at me, I knew one thing for sure. Things would never be the same. I was done. I stayed at a hotel that night, just for a change of scenery. I wasn't sure where I'd go long term, but I needed the space, the quiet. No kids, no Valerie's pleas. Just me, alone with my thoughts. The room felt sterile, unfamiliar, cold. But strangely, it was the first time in weeks that I didn't feel suffocated by the weight of everything. When I woke up the next morning, I could still hear Valerie's voice in my head. Please, Darren, don't leave me. I love you. I'll fix it, I swear. But it was too late for that. No amount of words could undo what had been done. I didn't know how I was going to face the kids yet. Riley and Emma deserved better than to have their lives flipped upside down. And that's what hit me hardest as I sat in that hotel room. This wasn't just about Valerie and me anymore. It was about them too. I'd been a father first and foremost, and now, I had to be the one to explain this mess. But I couldn't let it go on like this. I couldn't live under the same roof as Valerie pretending everything was fine when I knew the truth. There was no fixing it. Not for me, not for her. Not for us. The first call I made was to my sister, Lisa. She was the one person who had always been in my corner. The one person who wouldn't sugarcoat anything, who could tell me straight up when I was being an idiot or when I was making the right call. I needed someone solid, someone who knew me and didn't have any loyalty to Valerie or her family. Hey, I said, my voice quieter than usual. I need you to come over here today. I need to talk to you. She picked up on my tone immediately. Is everything okay? No. No, it's not. Can you just come, please? I need you to help me with something. I'm on my way, she said. No hesitation. The moment she walked into that hotel room, I felt a little lighter, a little less alone. But I knew the worst part was still ahead. What's going on, Darren? Lisa asked, taking a seat across from me. She didn't beat around the bush. Never did. You sound like you're going through hell. I am, I said flatly. Valerie's been cheating on me. I watched her face as she processed my words. Lisa didn't blink, didn't gasp. She just nodded slowly, as though this wasn't the first time she'd seen me on the edge. Are you sure? She asked, her voice steady but cautious. I mean, are you sure? I'm sure, I replied, my jaw tightening. I found the messages. She's been seeing some guy named Daniel, from the trip she took with Jessica. And don't think I didn't notice the way she's been acting since she got back. I ran a hand through my hair, the anger rising again. I'm done, Lisa. I'm done with all of it. I can't keep pretending I don't know what's going on. Lisa was quiet for a long moment, and for a split second, I thought she might try to talk me down, to offer some half-baked advice about forgiveness or saving the family. But instead, she gave me a hard look, like she was weighing something inside her. You're doing the right thing, she said finally, and I was relieved to hear that. You can't live like this. Not for her. Not for anyone. If she doesn't respect you, then why should you keep putting up with her? But you've got a bigger problem now. Yeah, I asked, raising an eyebrow. And what's that? You need to tell the kids, she said, her tone softer now. It's going to be hard, but you have to. They need to know the truth. They're not stupid, Darren. They can feel the tension. They can see something's wrong. If you don't tell them what's going on, they'll make up their own story, and you don't want that. Her words hit me hard. I had been so focused on my own hurt, my anger, that I hadn't even considered how this was affecting Riley and Emma. They were old enough to understand the basics of betrayal, even if they didn't have the words for it. And they certainly wouldn't understand me walking out without explaining myself. Yeah, I muttered, running a hand over my face. I know. I don't even know where to start. Lisa gave me a sympathetic look. You start by being honest with them. No sugarcoating it. They're your kids, Darren. They deserve to know. I don't want them to hate me, I said, more to myself than to her. She shook her head. They won't hate you. They'll be hurt, sure. But they won't hate you. You're their dad. I felt a lump in my throat, but I couldn't let myself break down, not in front of her. Not now. I'll call them, I said, swallowing hard. I'll talk to them when I get home. Lisa nodded. Good. And remember, you're not in this alone. You've got me. I'll help you through this. You just do what's right for you. That was all I needed to hear. Sometimes, you just need someone to have your back when the world feels like it's crashing down around you. After she left, I sat there for a while, staring at the hotel room walls. The weight of it all felt heavier now. I was going to lose everything. My marriage, my home, my family's idea of what was normal. I was going to have to tell Riley and Emma what had happened. How their mom had betrayed us all. And I had no idea how to make that any easier for them. But I had to do it. I had to tell them the truth. Valerie had already broken my heart. Now it was time to break the news to the kids. I stayed with Lisa for a week. It was a strange kind of peace, almost like I was in limbo. Neither here nor there. I kept busy, keeping my mind occupied with simple things. Playing games with the kids, sorting out some work, figuring out the logistics of what the next chapter was going to look like. But no matter what I did, the thought of Valerie haunted me. She still hadn't called, hadn't tried to reach out in any meaningful way. A part of me, maybe a stupid part, thought she'd come to her senses. That maybe, just maybe, she'd finally realize what she'd lost and do whatever it took to make things right. But the more I sat with it, the clearer it became. I was done. Valerie had made her choice, and the only thing left to do now was pick up the pieces. For me, for the kids. That week with Lisa gave me clarity, but it also made me anxious. There was still so much to figure out, and I wasn't even sure where to start. Divorce? Selling the house? Custody? All these questions hung over me like a dark cloud, threatening to rain at any moment. The one thing I knew for sure was that there was no going back. I still wasn't sure what was going on in Valerie's head. She hadn't tried to get in touch with the kids, and that was a problem. I wasn't going to be the one to make the first move. She'd crossed the line, and if she wanted to fix things with the kids, she'd have to show up for them. I wasn't going to be her emotional crutch anymore. But that didn't stop me from worrying about Riley and Emma. They were still adjusting to everything, still trying to make sense of the mess we were in. And I had to figure out how to explain the next part of it. The divorce. The fact that their mom had chosen someone else over us. I'd been avoiding the hard conversation, thinking maybe it would resolve itself somehow, but deep down I knew it was something I couldn't avoid much longer. They needed answers, and I needed to make sure they felt supported, no matter what. I called Lisa the morning I decided to head back to the house. It had been a week since I left, and I had a feeling that things were only going to get messier from here on out. I think I'm going back today, I told her over the phone, my voice sounding tired. You sure about that? She asked, sounding concerned. I don't know, I sighed. I don't want to drag this out anymore. I don't want to keep running. I need to face her. Face what's going on, face the kids. It's time to deal with it. Just don't do anything you'll regret, she warned, though I could tell she understood. She'd seen me break before, seen me try to fix things that weren't meant to be fixed. But this time, I wasn't trying to save anything. I was just trying to keep my family together, in whatever form that took. I won't, I said. I'm just going to talk to the kids and figure out what's next. Maybe she'll be gone by then. I don't know. That last part hit me harder than I expected. I couldn't shake the image of Valerie and Daniel together, couldn't shake the thought that she might have already moved on. I hated that I even cared. But I did. Lisa gave me a reassuring good luck and hung up, leaving me alone with my thoughts again. There was no going back. I pulled into the driveway later that afternoon, the house looking the same as it always did, except now, it felt like a stranger's home. It didn't feel like it was mine anymore. I didn't belong there. The kids were at school, thank God. That gave me a little time to prepare. I had no idea how to walk into that house and face Valerie, but I knew I had to. I had to show her that I wasn't just going to let her get away with this. Not anymore. I walked in through the front door, and the familiar scent of home hit me like a punch in the gut. It was empty, silent. Everything was as I remembered, but the house felt cold, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I headed straight to the bedroom. Valerie was sitting on the bed, her legs crossed, staring at her phone. She didn't look up when I entered. Not at first. I stood there for a moment, just taking her in. She looked the same, too perfect, almost, her makeup flawless, her hair styled as though nothing had changed. But her eyes told a different story. She didn't seem shocked to see me. If anything, she looked like she was bracing for impact, like she knew what was coming. I didn't waste any time. We need to talk, I said flatly. She finally looked up, and her face softened. That look, it almost made me feel guilty. But I couldn't let it get to me. Not anymore. Darren, I know you're angry, she started, her voice shaky, her usual confidence gone. But you have to understand, it wasn't like that. It was just one mistake. Just one mistake and I… Stop, I cut her off, my voice cold, sharper than I intended. I don't want to hear your excuses. It wasn't a mistake, Valerie. It was a choice. You made a choice to betray me. You made a choice to sleep with another man while I was at home, while we were supposed to be building something. Don't you dare call that a mistake. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Her face crumpled, and for the first time since I discovered the affair, I saw her as she truly was, vulnerable, scared and guilty. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. I never wanted to hurt you. Well, you did, I said, my tone flat. And now it's too late for apologies. You had your chance to fix it, Valerie, and you blew it. You've lost everything. She stared at me, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or something darker. But it didn't matter. I'm leaving, I said, turning to leave the room. I'll figure out where I'm going. But you're going to have to deal with the consequences of your actions. You don't get to play the victim anymore. As I walked out of the room, I could feel her eyes on me, but I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I was done. For good. The days that followed felt like a blur. Valerie tried calling a few times, but I ignored her. She sent texts too, a mix of pleading and apologizing, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to hear it. There was nothing left to say. She showed up at Lisa's house one evening, knocking on the door like she had a right to be there. Lisa wasn't home, but I knew I had to deal with her. I let her in, standing there in the doorway, watching as Valerie's eyes flickered with uncertainty. Darren, we need to talk, she said, her voice hoarse. She looked different, worn out, almost fragile. The image of the woman who had betrayed me now seemed far away, replaced by someone who was lost and desperate. I wasn't sure I felt sorry for her, but it was hard to ignore how small she looked standing there. No, I said, my voice flat. We don't need to talk anymore. There's nothing left to say. She stepped forward, but I held up my hand, stopping her. Valerie, I began, you had every opportunity to fix this. I gave you chances, and you threw them all away. You betrayed me, you betrayed the kids. That's something I can't forget, no matter how much you apologize, no matter how much you beg. Her eyes watered, but I didn't feel the weight of her tears the way I thought I would. Maybe that was what hurt the most, knowing that even in her sorrow, there was still a part of me that didn't care anymore. I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling. I never meant to hurt you, Darren. I made a mistake. Please, don't let this be the end. The end? I laughed bitterly. This isn't just an end, Valerie. This is the beginning of something new for me. I can't live like this anymore. I can't pretend that everything's okay when you've done this. You slept with another man. You lied to my face. That's not something you can just walk away from. She shook her head, her tears falling faster now. I never wanted this to happen. I didn't want to lose you. I still love you, Darren. I know I screwed up, but can't we at least try to fix this? For the kids, for us. It was the same old song. Same old promises. Same old words. But I wasn't falling for it this time. I don't want to fix this, I said. I can't fix this. There's no going back from what you've done. We've been through too much, and you've shown me who you really are. I don't know who that person is, and I'm not interested in finding out. I'm done. She stared at me, shock written all over her face. But there was nothing I could do to soften it. She'd crossed a line, and I had to let her see the full weight of that. The truth was, even if I wanted to fix it, I couldn't. There was too much hurt, too much betrayal. I stepped back, giving her space. I needed the distance. Needed to make sure she knew that this wasn't just a fleeting moment of anger, it was final. I'll take care of the kids, I said, my voice steady. But this marriage is over. I'm not coming back. I'll start the paperwork soon. Her face crumpled as she turned away from me, But I didn't stop her. I couldn't. I couldn't care anymore. The anger had burned too hot, and now all that was left was the cold void that took its place. She left not long after, but the silence in the house stayed with me, heavier than I ever expected it to be. As much as I wanted to feel relief, there was an emptiness, a weight that didn't quite lift, not yet. The divorce process was grueling. I knew it would be, but I wasn't prepared for the emotional toll it would take on all of us. Valerie kept trying to fight it, kept trying to drag me into long, drawn-out arguments. But I stayed strong, not letting her pull me back into the drama. The truth was, I had already made peace with the decision. I'd grieved the loss of my marriage in the quiet moments, and by the time the legal stuff started moving, I was ready to start fresh. As for the kids, it wasn't easy, but I tried to keep things as normal as possible. We started a new routine, and I made sure they knew I was there for them, no matter what. They didn't have to understand everything. Just that they were loved, and that we'd get through this together. The hardest part was seeing Valerie at the kids' events, trying to act like nothing had changed. She still showed up with that smile, that perfect image, but I saw through it. It was like she was a ghost of the woman I once loved. I didn't hate her anymore, not really, but the trust was gone, and with it, everything else. A year went by. I focused on the kids, on healing, on finding my footing again. There were days when I missed her, missed the life we once had. But those moments were fleeting. The truth was, I was stronger now. I'd come out of this mess with a clearer sense of who I was, and what I wasn't willing to tolerate. And then, one night, I met someone new. It wasn't anything grand. Just a simple conversation at a coffee shop. But when she smiled at me, something in me shifted. It wasn't about finding love again, not really. It was about realizing that I still had the capacity to care, to connect. That I wasn't broken beyond repair. I didn't rush into anything. I was cautious, taking things slow. But for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. Like maybe, just maybe, the pain and betrayal had a purpose. Like it had pushed me towards something better, something real. In the end, I learned a lot from everything that happened. About forgiveness, about trust, about the importance of standing up for yourself, even when it feels impossible. And while I may never forget what Valerie did, I also knew that I couldn't let it define me. The price of betrayal was steep. But I'd paid it, and I'd walked through it. And I came out the other side, still standing, still fighting, for my kids, for my future. And that was all that really mattered now.